It is believed that the Pawnee originated from as far south as Mexico because they had some unique practices among plain tribes that were typical of Mexican tribes. They migrated first to Louisiana and then north to where the Spanish encountered them in the 16th century in the vicinity of Arkansas River in southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. They were given their name in the 17th century when the French explorers along the Mississippi River at this time were told of this powerful tribe in the west. They appeared on the maps of Father Jacques Marquette in 1673, when the French with whom they were trading abandoned the area after 1763. The Pawnees continued northward to settle in Nebraska. The Pawnee tribes settled along the Platte, Loup, and Republican rivers in Nebraska and parts of northern Kansas. The Pawnee were divided into 4 distinct tribes. The northernmost were the Cherokee, who lived along the north bank of the Loup River. South of them, generally on the south bank of the Platte River, but extending as far south as the Republican River in Kansas, lived the Chowee. The Kitcohawkee and the Purewaties. In 1818, Pawnee began signing treaties with the United States that culminated in the tribe being placed on reservation in Nebraska in 1857. In 1857, they relocated to their current location in Oklahoma. The Pawnee were thought to have originated in Mexico because the Skitty tribe practiced human sacrifice of captive girls and kept human servants. Practices common to Mexican tribes but unique to them on the plains. They utilized human sacrifice to ensure fertility of the soil and success of the crops until one Pawnee chief became determined to stop it. His name was Padalasharo. In 1816, he was only 19. He rescued a Comanche girl from the scaffold at last minute and commanded the priests to stop their barbarianism and cruelty. Other warriors backed him up despite the priest's threats of placing them on Padalasharo. Become a hero of the future generations of Pawnee for standing up to the powerful priesthood. The Pawnee themselves believed that their ancestors came from the southwest. The band of the nation lived as independent units. The Skiri in the north spoke a distinct dialect of Pawnee, while the 3 bands of Pawnee in the south spoke a single dialect of the language. Governing each band or village were 4 chiefs, a head chief and 3 subordinate chiefs, who wielded considerable authority. The head chief's position and that of the others was hereditary. Although an individual could achieve chiefly status through success in war, the Pawnee were perhaps the most religious group on the plains. Tirawa, the god who represented the open sky, was the most important god. Tirawa was a purely spiritual being and had other heavenly gods helping him and guarding the people. They believed the morning stars where God lived. Crops were planted according to the position of stars as they equated the stars with God. The Pawnee are a matrilineal people. Ancestry is traced through the mother. After marriage, the young couple moved into the bride's parents' lodge. Females usually married after their 15th birthday, while males waited until they were 18. Both sexes generally married a mature spouse as their first partner. The inexperienced youths were considered incapable of performing their respective matrimonial duties adequately. Thus, the Pawnees felt it was desirable to have an experienced spouse from whom to learn. Women tended to remain within a single lodge, while men would typically move between lodges. Men and women had distinct roles in the tribe. Women tended to be responsible for decisions about resource allocation, trade, and inter-lodge social negotiations. Mature women did most of the labor cultivating the soil and working the hide of the buffalo, while younger women would learn responsibilities of what was expected of them. Older women looked after the younger children of the tribe. Men were responsible for decisions pertaining to hunting, war, and spiritual and health issues. They were divided into 3 groups: the medicine men, priests, the warriors, and the hunters. There was also a custom among the Pawnees by which young men and boys who had as yet made no name for themselves by their deeds lived as servants in the families of the chiefs. Here they were fed and lodged in their turn all kinds of errands, such as caring for the horses and carrying messages. The medicine men would perform ceremonies to regulate the weather. Priests sought good fortune and orderly world through knowledge of the complex rituals and knowledge associated with each village's sacred bundle, a collection of symbolic and ritual objects wrapped in a buffalo hide casing. The village had a sacred bundle that served as a sacred object that would save the village and act as an altar for its rituals. Children in the villages were treated as belonging to everyone. In the spring, they lived permanent village of dome-shaped earth lodges, buildings and often housing 2 or more families and 20 or more individuals. The lodges were constructed by the women of the tribe. Generally, 2 heads of households were shared each lodge. One oversaw the northern sector and the other oversaw the southern sector. During the season, economic and ritual activity focused the horticulture. Women prepared and planted gardens of 10 varieties of corn, several pumpkins and squashes, and beans. Men engaged in the religious rituals associated with gardening. Prior to the arrival of the horse, the people lived in permanent villages and farmed the ground. Any hunting was done with dogs who carried packs. Archaeology studies of ancient sites have demonstrated the people lived this lifestyle for nearly 700 years, since about 1250. Before the white men came, the Pawnees made their own tools and weapons out of wood, flint, and stone, chipping the flint into sharp points for their arrow and spearheads and making hammers and axes out of stones. For hoes they tied the strings of rawhide, sharp shoulder blades of buffaloes to sticks. Around 1700, the Pawnee began to acquire horses by raiding tribes far to the southwest, who in turn got the animals from the Spanish. While horses providing a great range, people traveled in both summer and winter westward to the Great Plains for buffalo hunting. They often traveled 500 miles or more in a season. Summer hunts extended from late June to about 1st of September, but might end early if hunting was successful. In late August, they returned to their earth lodge villages to harvest the crops. Winter hunts were from late October until February or March, and were often to the southwest. During the hunt, they lived in teepees that could house up to 18 people. After the winter hunt, they returned to their earth lodges to begin the cycle again. During the long hunt periods, they killed elk, deer, bear, beaver, otter, raccoon, badger, squirrels, and especially bison. One bison would provide enough meat to feed one person for a full year. The traditional clothing of the Pawnees consisted of moccasins made from otter skins with buffalo skins serving as the main material for clothing. In warmer climates, the men would wear loin clothes. In winter, buffalo robes and long leather pants were added. These men would wear a second belt in addition to the one that held up their loincloths. This belt would be used to hang their tomahawks, knives, and guns. Females would wear skirts and moccasins in the summertime. In the winter, they would wear buckskin dresses with leggings. Both men and women would pierce their ears and wear ornate beading earrings. A unique feature of the Pawnee was the way they wore their hair. They prepared the scalp hair by dressing it with buffalo fat until it stood up and curved back like a horn. As was typical of many Indian tribes, each band saw to its own. Different Pawnee sub-tribes could make treaties with warring European powers without disrupting the underlying tribe unity. In response to the pressures from the Spanish, French, and Americans, as well as neighboring tribes, the Pawnee began to draw closer to each other. In the 18th century, the Pawnee were allied with the French, with whom they traded. With French guns and ammunition, they were able to defend themselves from incessant Apache attacks. They played an important role in halting the Spanish expansion onto the Great Plains by decisively defeating them in the Battle of 1720. In the 19th century, however, white immigration and transcontinental travel went directly through the traditional Pawnee territory. As the century progressed, immigration swelled, putting increased demands in the region's limited natural resources. The buffalo and other game required for food on the pastures, on the wood used for houses for fuel, and ultimately upon very land Pawnee considered their own. Simultaneously, the forced removal of the eastern tribes to the west of the Mississippi River added approximately 30% to the Native American population of the eastern plains and created even more subsistence demands on an already economically uncertain environment. With the increase in population came pressure on the Pawnee to relinquish large portions of their territory. Swelling groups encroaching from the east also brought disease. Epidemics of smallpox, malaria, warfare, Sioux, and Cheyenne drastically reduced the numbers of Pawnee. Missionary efforts began in 1831 with the arrival of the Presbyterians. Under pressure from the Sioux tribes and European American settlers, the Pawnee ceded the territory to the United States government in treaties 1818, 1825, 1833, 1848, 1857, and 1892. In 1857, they settled on the Pawnee Reservation along Loup River in present-day Nebraska. Warriors enlisted as Pawnee Scouts in the latter half of the 19th century in the United States Army. Instead of fighting against westward expansion, they served with the Army for 14 years between 1864 and 1877. During the Plains Indian War against the Sioux, Cheyenne, the Apache, earning a reputation as being a well-trained unit. Pawnee Scouts under Sky Chief were enlisted to protect workers engaged in constructing the Union Pacific Railroad's transcontinental line through Nebraska and Wyoming during the late 1860s. Angered by Pawnee support of the Americans, the Sioux raided the party of the Pawnees hunting buffalo, and 86 were killed. The site is known as Massacre Canyon. In 1874, the Pawnee requested relocation to Indian Territory, Oklahoma. Many young progressive Pawnees soon began to move onto individual farms during their first decade in Indian Territory. By 1890, most of the Sciri, a large portion of the Chowie, were living in houses on their own farms, dressing like contemporary whites and speaking English in daily life. However, over the first 3 decades of their new residence in Indian Territory, the Pawnee people experienced poor health, coupled with inadequate sanitation and health care. As a result, the population reached a record low of 629 individuals in 1901 and did not begin to recover until the 1930s. Village life had been replaced by life on individual farms. A mixed horticulture, hunting, subsistence pattern had given way to agriculture and government rations. The authority of chiefs had been replaced by that of agent, and religious ceremonies known to the knowledge of sacred bundles was rapidly disappearing, as a priest who possessed that knowledge died and no successors came forward. The U.S. government dismantled the Pawnee tribal government and civic institutions in 1906. The tribe reorganized under the Oklahoma Indian Welfare Act of 1936 and established the Pawnee Business Council, the Chiefs Council, and a tribal constitution. The Business Council was to act for the tribe and transact its business, while Chiefs Council was a largely symbolic entity. In the 1960s, the government settled a suit by Pawnee Nation regarding their compensation for land ceded to the U.S. government in the 19th century. By an out-of-court settlement in 1964, the Pawnee Nation was awarded $7,316,970 for land ceded to the U.S. and undervalued by the federal government in the previous century. Additional surrounding lands were added to their land in 1968. In 1980, a tribal roundhouse modeled the traditional Pawnee Earth Lodge was built to serve as a social center for dances and other events. All of those acquisitions have provided the Pawnee tribe today, the Pawnee Nation, with both physical and symbolic locus for tribal administration and social identity. Today's Pawnee Indians meet yearly for intertribal gathering and celebrate their culture through craft shows and powwows. They operate their housing authority and maintain 2 casinos, 3 smoke shops, 2 fuel stations, and 1 truck stop. Their estimated revenue for 2010 was $10.5 million. With those and other planned development projects, the Pawnee Nation has entered an unprecedented period of prosperity. There are approximately 3,240 enrolled Pawnee, with 1,791 living in Oklahoma. Their current elected president is Marshall R. Grover. Enrollment into the tribe requires a minimum 1/8 blood quantum. Despite pressure from the American settlers who settled on or near their lands, and constant pressure from the United States government to sign away their lands and treaties, the Pawnees never went to war with the United States. They did, on occasion, send raiding parties through Texas on their way to Mexico during the mid-19th century. For the most part, however, they tried to work out their grievances within the system. Pawnee have served in all American wars and since the Indian Wars when they were scouts.